And I'm going to go ahead and start. So we are picking up, I believe, page 1261, Act 2. I'm actually going to back up just a little bit for a minute to Hamlet's final words in Act 1. He gets Horatio and Marcellus to swear that they won't tell anybody about the ghost, and also to swear that, or to not indicate to anybody that they know Hamlet's acting, if he acts crazy, okay? Where he says, line 170, how strange or odd soe'er I bear myself, as I perchance hereafter shall think meet, to put an antic disposition on, that you at such times, seeing me, never shall, with arms encumbered thus, or this head shake, or by pronouncing, well, we know, blah, blah. Don't give anything out that you know I'm acting crazy or antic, all right? So, one of the big questions for the play, and it's really for all the play, but a lot of people will say from this point out is, where does Hamlet act crazy, and where is Hamlet really crazy? Or another way of putting that, is Hamlet ever really crazy? Does he lose his mind, in other words? Okay? So, he finishes the speech after they all swear and says, let's go in together, that is, let's go back into the castle together, and still your finger on your lips, that is, keep in mind, don't say anything. The time is out of joint. O cursed spite that ever I was born to set it right. What does he mean, time is out of joint? Think of that great chain of being. It goes all the way down. Time is like the great chain of being also. He's saying time has skipped a beat, or it skipped an hour, or it skipped a day. You can't do that. Because time now, Star Trek, doesn't matter which series, because they all do it, always will have some kind of episode where someone is, to use the language that they use, out of phase with our reality. So that they can hear, they can see, but we, in this reality, can't see, can't hear, can't interact with that person. Okay? Hamlet is kind of saying that's what's happened to time. Time has now got to be fixed. O cursed spite that ever I was born to set it right. Hamlet's implying his, to use a French phrase, raison d'etre, his reason for being, was to fix the problem with time. Only problem is, what's got to happen to fix it? Hamlet has to become like a gear in the mechanics of time. In other words, he's going to get chewed up. He's going to die. All right? So, Act 2. Polonius comes in with Reynaldo, his man, and he gives Reynaldo some money to be given to Laertes and such. But he also gives Reynaldo a charge. He's sending Reynaldo to France, okay? One, to give Laertes some money, but also why? What's he going to do while he's there? Is he just giving the money and then leaving? Going, spending time off by himself? No. He's going to spy on Laertes. Why does Polonius want Reynaldo to spy on Laertes? What did he tell Laertes before Laertes left Elsinore to go back to France? He gave him those precepts, right? That speech with all the proverbs. He wants to find out whether or not his son is doing what he told him to do. or told him not to do. Okay? So what does that show about his relationship with his son? He doesn't trust him. Exactly. Okay? So, Reynaldo agrees, says I will, blah, blah, blah. Ophelia comes in. And he says, page 1263, line 73, how now, Ophelia, what's the matter? Why does he ask her what's the matter? Does Ophelia just walk on the stage, everything's fine? No. She needs to kind of hurry on the stage and look flustered, look bothered. And that's why he says, what's the matter? By the way, that phrase, what's the matter, is going to be used again shortly. But it's going to be used in a totally different context, okay? And Hamlet's going to interpret it the way I kind of just, talked about it, that something is going on. And Polonius is going to mean it, because he's going to ask what's the matter, in a totally different way than it's being used here. Oh, my Lord, I've been so frightened. What in the name of God? As I was sewing in my closet, her room, not her literal closet, Hamlet, with his doublet all embraced, no hat upon his head, his stockings fouled, ungartered, down jived to his ankle, pale as his shirt, his knees knocking each other, and with a look so piteous and purport, he comes before me. So everything she has just described about Hamlet fits to a T the medical diagnosis in Shakespeare's day of lovesickness. He's not wearing a hat. His doublet isn't tied. His garters, his stockings are down around his ankles, so his bare legs are showing, Okay. Mad for thy love. Notice, he assumes Hamlet is mad, not angry, crazy, out of his mind for her love. My Lord, I do not know, but truly I do fear it. So why does he assume he's mad? Because of the description. He's not in his right mind. That's what being in love does to you. It makes you not think correctly, especially if the love is spurned, right? So, what did he say? He took me by the wrist and held me hard. Then goes he to the length of all his arm. So he grabbed her by the wrist. So Ophelia's here, grabs her by the wrist. So Hamlet's over here. He's got her wrist, and he does this. So his arm is fully extended. Her arm is fully extended. And with his other hand, thus o'er his brow, he falls to such perusal of my face. So he's like this, but holding on to her. As a would draw it, like he's going to draw me. Long stayed he so, at last a little shaking of mine arm. And thrice his head, thus waving up and down, he raised a sigh so piteous and profound, as it did seem to shatter all his bulk. He shakes. That done, he lets me go, and with his head over his shoulder turned, he seemed to find his way without his eyes. That is, he lets her go, and he does this. Notice, I'm not looking, I have no idea if anybody's coming through that door right now. That's why she says, without his eyes. For out of doors he went without their helps, and to the last bended their life on me. He couldn't not look at her. Okay? Polonius, we got to go talk to the king. This is the very ecstasy of love. And I've talked about that word ecstasy, where the soul leaves the body. Hamlet, he means ecstasy here, though, crazy. He's lost his mind. Okay? Whose violent property fordoes itself and leads the will to desperate undertakings. If we don't nip this problem, okay, he's suggesting Hamlet may what? Kill himself. That's the fordoes itself. As oft as any passion under heaven that does afflict our natures. I'm sorry. Why is he sorry? have you given him any words, any hard words of late? She says, no, but as you did command. I repelled his letters and denied his access to me. See, I think Polonius knows what she's going to say. And when he says, I am sorry, he's saying, I screwed up. What did he think Hamlet was really expressing towards Ophelia with his tenders of love? Earlier, Act 1. What did he say Hamlet really wanted? Sex. Nothing permanent. He doesn't love you. He just wants to get you in bed and move on to his next conquest. Now, I think Polonius realizes or assumes, I was totally wrong. Okay? And what does she reply? Well, I did exactly what you commanded me to do. I closed the door and locked it. I told Hamlet, go away. When he sent letters, I put return to sender. In other words, she goes from accepting his letters and his tenders and from having conversations to immediately cutting him off. That hath made him mad. Again, crazy. Only Americans use the word mad to mean angry. Okay? British English, it's always crazy, lunatic, out of his mind. I am sorry that with better heed and judgment I had not quoted him. When I told you before about Hamlet, he says, I was wrong. I feared he did but trifle, and she was his trifle, his plaything, and meant to rack thee. Rack. We're used to that word spelled like this. If you quote unquote put on the rack, a medieval form of torture, it was actually in the Tower of London too. At the time, when Shakespeare's writing this play, people were still being put on the rack. It's a thing that you get put on, and one part of it gets pulled this direction, and another part gets pulled this direction. Okay? He meant to rack thee, however, isn't meant that he wants to tear you apart. It means he wants to lie upon you. Or that's what I thought. But beshrew my jealousy. One of the age-old issues in Shakespeare between fathers and daughters. Fathers, in many of Shakespeare's plays, are jealous of their daughters' lovers because they want the attention the daughter used to show the father. Not sexually. Don't go all Freudian, okay? So he says, let's go to the king. So scene 2. We see the king and queen, and the king welcomes in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, okay? And he tells them, line 4, something have you heard of Hamlet's transformation? So call it. Now what does transformation mean? Trans, across, formation, shaping or making, being made into something else. He's telling us Hamlet, what? Is not Hamlet. Hamlet is going to use that exact same phrase later on in Act 5. Okay? That Hamlet is not Hamlet. He says, so call it. Why? Because neither the exterior nor the inward man resembles that it was. Hamlet now goes about dressed how? All in black. He's implying, up until a month or two ago, Hamlet didn't only wear black. So, exteriorly, he looks different. Inwardly, he implies, he's also different. What's the problem with that statement? How does he know? Think of the minister's black veil for a moment. The minister's dying words. What does he say? I look and lo, behold, on every visage a black veil. Now, none of the people that he sees is literally wearing a black veil. What's he saying? Inwardly they are. Why? What's the whole purport of the black veil in everything he says, seemingly, in every sermon from the first moment he puts one on? Sin, more specifically, I mean, you're right, everybody's doing what? Hiding. Everybody's hiding something. So, assume for the moment that that is true, how can he make a comment about Hamlet's inward state if Hamlet's hiding something? How do we know? Okay, is one of the questions raised. So, he says, what it should be more than his father's death that thus hath put him so much from the understanding of himself, I cannot dream of. That hath put him from the understanding of himself. That's kind of a definition of lunacy, if you don't know who you are. Okay? But what's the point of his statement? It can't just be his father's death. There's got to be something else. What does that tell us about Claudius? Did Claudius have a good relationship with his father? Keep in mind, who was Claudius's father? Hamlet Sr.'s father also. Hamlet Sr. passed on the crown to, Hamlet Sr.'s father passed the crown on to him. Why? Eldest son. See, in a society based in primogeniture, if you're not the eldest son, life sucks for you, man. You don't get anything. Imagine being like, as happened in one of the medieval kings' families, English kings' families. Imagine being like the 8th son. You get nothing. Okay? I mean, absolutely nothing. So, he says, I can't imagine what the problem is. So why are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern there? That I entreat you both that being of so young days brought up with him, that is, they grew up with Hamlet from childhood, and since so neighbor to his youth and behavior, you know what Hamlet should be like, that you vouchsafe your rest here in our court some little time. Stay here with us. Live in the castle. He's not saying, assume this is London. Get a nice place on Park Avenue. He's saying, live in Buckingham Palace with us. Why? So they can be near Hamlet. So by your companies to draw him on to pleasures, and to gather so much as from occasion you may glean, whether aught to us unknown afflicts him thus. That, opened, lies within our remedy. Now that sounds warm and compassionate and caring. Help us understand what's wrong with Hamlet, because if it's in our power, I will help Hamlet. The Queen says, you're the best friends he's had. I'm sure, and sure I am, 2 men there are not living to whom he more adheres, connects himself to. So, help us. And they say, we will do all we can. Guildenstern, line 29, but we both obey and here give up ourselves in the full bent to lay our service, full bent to the utmost degree of our mental capacity, to lay our service freely at your feet, to be commanded. So, give us orders and we'll do whatever you ask. King, thanks Rosencrantz and gentle Guildenstern. Queen, thanks Guildenstern and gentle Rosencrantz. Why doesn't she just repeat what the king said? Why does she reverse the names? Because they're totally interchangeable. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. Doesn't matter which one you call which. They're ciphers in that sense. Their characters individually don't matter. They're bookends. They're exactly the same. Tom Stoppard, famous British playwright, wrote a play in the 60s called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. And it was one of the greatest plays of what's called the theater of the absurd, to point out the utter absurdity of life, that life has no meaning. And in the play, he has them go back and forth, and sometimes they switch. So that guild, if I remember correctly, so that guild in turn is called Rosencrantz and vice versa. Showing identity, it means nothing. You think you're special. You're not. We're all zip, essentially. Okay? So, they agree. They leave. Ambassadors come in with Polonius. And the king says, Polonius says, I have some information about Hamlet, but listen to the ambassadors first. So Voltimand and Cornelius come in. They tell him what they've discovered, from the king of Norway and such. And then they leave. So the Polonius addresses them, lines 86 and following. My liege and madam, to expostulate what majesty should be, what duty is, why day is day, night, night, and time is time, were nothing but to waste night, day, and time. Therefore, since brevity is the soul of wit, and tediousness the limbs and outward flourishes, I will be brief. Okay, he just used 6 lines to say, I will be brief. He's not very brief. Your noble son is mad. Mad call I it, for to define true madness, what is it but to be nothing else but mad? Queen, more matter, remember, what's the matter? More matter with less art. So, what does she mean by the word matter here?
Substance.
Substance. Get to the point with less art. That is, less artifice, less rhetoric.
Is that like sugarcoating?
Louder?
Sugarcoating?
Yeah. He says, madam, I swear I use no art at all. That is, I don't use any rhetoric. That he is mad, 'tis true. 'Tis true that it's true, it's a pity. And a pity, 'tis true. A foolish figure, but farewell it, for I will use no art. Mad, let us grant him then, that is, assume he is mad. And now remains that we find out the cause of this effect. So, he wasn't mad before, something's happened, now he's mad. So we need to find out the cause that's created this effect. Or rather say the cause of this defect. Why? For this effect, defective, this effect, this result, which is defective, comes by cause. Something must have created it. Thus it remains, and the remainder thus. Perpend, that is, consider for a moment. I have a daughter. While she is mine, that is, before I marry her off, who in her duty and obedience mark, that is, take note, hath given me this. And he reads a letter, or a portion of a letter. Okay? Queen, came this from Hamlet to her? Good, madam. Just hold on. He keeps quoting, and he says, 124, this in obedience hath my daughter shown me, and more above, that is, in many others, hath his solicitings, as they fell out by time, by means and place, all given to my ear. She has told me everything about her relationship with Hamlet. King, how hath she received his love? Okay, now she's received a bunch of letters. That kind of tells us what? At the bare minimum, she hasn't been antagonistic to Hamlet. Okay? Polonius, what do you think of me? Man faithful and honorable? I would fain prove so. But what might you think when I'd seen this hot love on the wing, as I proceeded? I must tell you that before my daughter told me, what might you, or my dear majesty, your queen, think if I played the desk or table book? Okay? Or given my heart a winking, mute and dumb, that is, given my heart a signal to keep silent. What would you think if I knew and didn't do anything? What might you think? Now it's a rhetorical question. Because what is Polonius to the king and queen? And what is Ophelia to the king and queen? Polonius is an advisor, chief counselor, Lord Chamberlain. Royal blood? No. Ophelia, future princess? No, because you're born a princess. You're not made a princess. All right? So he says, I went round to work, meaning I stopped it. I cut it off in its tracks. I told her, Lord Hamlet is a prince out of thy star, out of your reach. This must not be. Okay? And so he says, from this, Hamlet fell into a sadness, then into a fast, then to a watch, thence into a weakness, thence to a lightness, and by this declension, into the madness wherein now he raves. He's madly in love with Ophelia, and I told her to break it off. You think so? Could be. But when he asks, you think so, the king, he's asking Gertrude. He's not asking Polonius. Why is he asking Gertrude? Who should know her son, or Hamlet, better than his mother? Polonius. Hath there been such a time, I would fain know that I positively said 'tis so, when it proved otherwise? Have I ever told you something that was wrong? Polonius is asking. King. No, not that I know. Take this from this, if this be otherwise. Take my head from my shoulders, if I'm wrong. Meaning, kill me. If I'm wrong on this, kill me. It's a little bit of foreshadowing. Okay? So, how can we try this further? Try means prove, test. Do you know Hamlet sometimes he walks 4 hours together here in the lobby? Yeah. At such a time, I'll loose my daughter to him. What does that sound like? What do you loose on others? Generally, dogs. You loose dogs on others. You loose dogs on escaped prisoners. You loose dogs, if you're British, on foxes for a fox hunt. You loose dogs to chase, things you're hunting. That's what you do, okay? So notice what he's suggesting Ophelia will become. And I'm not suggesting a dog. What else is she becoming? I'll loose my daughter to him. Be you and I behind an arras then. Mark the encounter. That is, watch, note the encounter. If he love her not, and be not from his reason fallen thereon, let me be no assistant for his state. So, take these off. The arras usually is what covers or is pulled aside for a doorway. When somebody's entering, they're pulled aside. If this is meant to be a room, then they will be pulled close, except for one, to indicate a doorway. All right? So he says, when Hamlet walks for 4 hours at a time in this lobby, so say Hamlet's going to be over here, he says, I'll loose my daughter to him. And you and I will be standing, those are feet, right there, and will mark what they do. Big question. Can they mark? Can they note what's happening if Claudius and Polonius are off stage? No, they can't. Because even though it may not be a physical door, if this is the stage and this is the tiring house, then they are no longer physically there once they step off that stage. But if they're behind an arras and they can listen to what's going on, they're physically then on the stage. Why is this going to be important? Because Ophelia's going to be out here, Act 3, Hamlet's going to be here, and Polonius and Claudius are going to be behind an arras. Ophelia's going to be walking with a book in her hand. Hamlet's going to walk out and deliver the so-called greatest soliloquy in the English language. And yet he's not alone on the stage. Therefore, it's not a soliloquy. It is all an act. Okay? So, Ophelia becomes what for Polonius then? A spy. She's part of the observing, part of the observation apparatus. Let's put it that way. But before that happens, when the king says we will try it, Hamlet enters. So it's like Claudius, Gertrude, and Polonius are here. Hamlet enters. Claudius and Gertrude quickly leave. Hamlet comes in, and Polonius confronts him and says, he tells us, line 169, I'll board him presently. Now your gloss says accost. Yeah, that is what it means, but does anybody know what the metaphor, because that's what the word board is, what the metaphor refers to? It's naval terminology. It's military naval terminology. When you board an enemy ship, you take like what would be a gangplank, and you literally slap it down from the railing from your ship to the other ship. It usually has nails driven through on the far end, so that when it hits that railing, it sticks. And that's what sailors run across to take command of that other ship. It's a violent image. So he says, I'll board him presently. Okay? How does my good Lord Hamlet? Well, God of mercy. Do you know me, my Lord? Do you know who I am? Excellent well. You are a fishmonger. Your gloss tells you. An opprobrious expression meaning bawd, procurer. I think I've talked about this before. How many of you hear the word bawd? Ever? Nobody does. It's a useless footnote. What's it mean? Another four-letter word. Pimp. A procurer of what? Flesh. A fishmonger, the word fishmonger, was slang for a pimp or madam. Because what do pimps and madams do? They sell flesh. Okay? Male, female, young, old, doesn't matter. Not I, my lord. I mean, he knows what he means. Now, literal, very top surface level meaning, fishmonger. A monger is one who sells or markets in fish. Like you go to an open air fish market. The person behind the stall is a fishmonger. You have other kinds of mongers. You've got vegetable mongers and fruit mongers and ironmongers. They still use in Britain the term ironmonger to refer to a hardware shop. Hardware, iron, seller. Okay? No, not me. Then I would you were so honest a man. Honest, my lord? How is a pimp or madam honest? Do you go to a pimp or a madam for a burger and fries? No. Do you go to a pimp or madam for a new car? No, you don't. Do you go to get your phone fit? No. You go to them for one reason and one reason alone. In that sense, they're honest. You know what you're going to get. Okay? I, sir, to be honest as this world goes, is to be one man picked out of 10,000. That is, for every one honest person, there are what? 10,000 scumbags, 10,000 liars. In Midsummer Night's Dream, for every one faithful lover, there were what? 1,000,000 who weren't faithful. Okay? Polonius, oh yeah, that's true. For if the son breed maggots in a dead dog, being a good kissing carrion, have you a daughter? What? If the son breed maggots in a dead dog, being a good kissing carrion, look at your footnote. Good kissing carrion, a good piece of flesh for kissing. Okay, it's another stupid footnote. Because the footnote ought to explain what the idea is being discussed. It was thought in Shakespeare's day that when a carcass of an animal starts developing, let's say, maggots, where do the maggots come from? Louder? Flies. That's what we know. They didn't know that in Shakespeare's day. Or it was a commonplace trope, at least, image, that the maggots came from the sun. And the sun, shining its rays down upon the rotting flesh, impregnated it. And the product of the impregnating were maggots. So, crude way of putting it, the sun has sex with the carcass, and the offspring are the maggots crawling all over. So, back to Hamlet. For if the son breed maggots in a dead dog, being a good kissing carrion, have you a daughter? Why does he bring up a daughter? Because daughters can get pregnant. I have, my lord. Let her not walk in the sun. Conception is a blessing. As your daughter may conceive. Friend, look to it. What has he just done? He's conflated the possible pregnancy of your daughter with the sun creating maggots. You jam those two together, and what might the daughter conceive? Maggots. The only thing is, in Hamlet's conception, as he's trying to get this across, and he's going to do this other times throughout the rest of the play, what are the maggots? We're the maggots. Humanity is maggoty. Okay? Polonius. Aside. Again, so only the audience hears this. Hamlet does not hear it at all. How say you by that? Still harping on my daughter. Yet he knew me not as a fishmonger. It's far gone. Totally crazy. And truly in my youth I suffered much extremity for love. Now, that's a pretty interesting reveal on Polonius's part. Because he's saying, when I was young like Hamlet is, I was kind of like him too. Okay? So he says, I'll speak to him again. What do you read, my lord? Because Hamlet has a little book. Words, words, words. What is the matter, my lord? See now, what does he mean by what is the matter? Because it's different than what Gertrude meant. What is the matter of the words? What are you reading about? What's the topic? Okay? Hamlet understands what is the matter to be, there's a problem between somebody. There's conflict somewhere. So he says, between who? The matter that you read. Oh, it's slanders. And he goes on and gives this little speech. And he says, but I wouldn't like to have such things written down. Because what does he describe? He describes old men. Old men have gray beards, faces are wrinkled, eyes are purging, thick amber, that is watery eyes, plum tree gum, that they have a plentiful lack of wit, because they go senile, together with most weak hands, weak legs, all which, sir, though I most powerfully and potently believe, that is, it's true, I hold in my honesty to have it thus set down. Why? For yourself, sir, should be old as I am. Now, Polonius is older than Hamlet. We don't know how old Polonius is. We don't yet know how old Hamlet is. How old do you think Hamlet is? Throw out a number.
Like 24.
24? Okay. You're off, but we'll get to it in Act 5. That's when we find out how old he is. He says, you should be as old as I am, if like a crab, you could go backward. I don't think they should describe old men. You're old. But you'd be as old as I am if you could go backward, because crabs walk backwards, right? Polonius. Though this be madness, yet there is method in it. What's the problem with Polonius' statement? I don't mean with the words, but with the concept. Mad people, crazy people, I mean literally ape you know what crazy people, there's not usually a method to it, a rationality to it. He's saying he's crazy, but that kind of makes sense. And that shouldn't be the case. Will you walk out of the air, my lord? What's Polonius mean? Let's go outside. I kind of think you need some fresh air. Hamlet. Into my grave. Indeed, that's out of the air, right? You walk on the ground, there's a 6-foot hole in the ground, and you step in it. You're no longer in the air, so to speak. You're now underground. How pregnant sometimes his replies are. In other words, his replies, being pregnant, they're full of meaning. They get to a deeper meaning, you know. A happiness that often madness hits on, which reason and sanity could not so prosperously be delivered of. So he says, I'll find a means to have my daughter confront him. My honorable lord, I will most humbly take my leave of you. And it's almost like, Polonius bows and gets ready to leave. Why does he say this? Because this is proper. This is how nobles or courtiers speak to their lords, to those higher than them. Okay? I will most humbly take my leave of you. Hamlet, you cannot, sir, take from me anything that I will more willingly part withal. I willingly part with what? You're leaving. That's a fancy way of saying, get the hell out of here.
Sorry, I can't help it.
It's okay. Leave now. So, you cannot take anything that I would more willingly part with all. I don't even want you in my presence. But he doesn't stop there. Except what? My life, except my life, except my life. So I willingly part from, your leave. What's the except my life, except my life, except my life imply? You can't take that from me. You can kill me. And that's not willing, or is it? Whereas Hamlet kind of, setting up a suicide by cop kind of an image. I'll do something to make you try to kill me. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern come in. Okay? Polonius leaves. And Hamlet says to them, how do ye both? Top of 1270. As the indifferent children of the earth, that is ordinary common people. Happy in that we are not over happy on fortune's cap, we are not the very button. I didn't try to draw fortune. Fortune should be portrayed as a goddess. And she stands there, and she spins her wheel, called Fortune's Wheel. It's where the game show gets its name, Wheel of Fortune. Okay? And everybody is on this wheel. we each have our own fortune's wheel, and fortune is spinning it for each of us. Okay? So, Guildenstern says, we're not over happy. Why? Because on fortune's cap, so imagine, somebody's head here, head on the head, and there's a button on the top. He says, we're not on the button on fortune's cap. Transfer that idea to the wheel. So fortune's cap would be here up at the top, fortune's feet would be down here at the bottom, and fortune's waist would be there in the middle. We're not at the top of fortune. Why are they happy that they're not there? This thing always turns. Sometimes it seems to turn fast, sometimes it seems to turn slow. When you reach up here at the pinnacle, that's when you fall. That's where Oedipus was at the beginning of Oedipus the king. And then he fell. So, Hamlet, nor are you the soles of her feet. So what do you experience when you're down here? You're, one of the homeless, standing by the road, hungry, need food. You have nothing left. Neither, my lord. Then you live about her waist, or in the middle of her favors. Okay? Guildenstern, faith. That is in faith. Her privates we. That is, we live around fortune's privates. Hamlet, in the secret parts of fortune, oh, most true. She is a strumpet. What's the news? That is, she's a whore. Fortune is a slut. Shakespeare plays with this idea throughout most of his works. It runs throughout the sonnets. Why? Because fortune sleeps with everything. This table, this marker, because I can guarantee you within a week or two, this marker will be empty. That is, fortune will have used it up and then discarded it. Okay? Everything gets run down by fortune and or time. So, what's the news? No news, but the world's grown honest. People are true to one another. Then is doomsday near. Must be the end of the world, Hamlet says. Your news is not true, he says. Let me ask you more. Why did fortune send you to prison hither? Prison, my lord? Denmark's a prison. Then is the world one. A goodly one in which there are many confines, that is, small rooms, wards, and dungeons, Denmark being one of the worst. Hamlet doesn't disagree. He says, you're right, the world is a prison. Okay? We think not so, my lord. Why then 'tis none to you, for there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. What's Hamlet's point? It's the attitude that makes something horrible or good. John Milton, in his big long poem, Paradise Lost, written to quote unquote justify the ways of God to man, has the character Satan say, the mind can make a heaven of hell a hell of heaven. Now, why would Satan say the mind can make heaven into hell?
Perception.
Yeah. What did Satan want? If you know the typical biblical Christian story. He wanted to set his throne up higher than God. He wanted to be God. Well, there's, in heaven at least, in the Christian story, there's only one God. There's not room for two. So, no, he gets kicked out of heaven. So, when he couldn't reign in heaven, that turned heaven into what for him? Hell. So he gets thrown into hell. But he can reign down here. I can call all the shots. Better to reign in hell, Satan also says, than serve in heaven. Because the mind can make a heaven of hell. Hamlet's point? Our thinking is what makes things good or bad. St. Paul in the New Testament talks about fasting rules. It says some people can eat meat and some people can't. To the person who can't eat meat, the meat is bad to that person. To the person who can eat meat, the meat is good. Notice, the meat in and of itself isn't good or bad. It's what? It's how one thinks about it. Okay? So he goes on. Rosencrantz. Why then your ambition makes it one. Your ambition is what makes Denmark a hell. What's he saying? You want to be king. Well, yeah. I mean, after all, what was Hamlet's father? King. Hamlet. Oh God, I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space were it not that I have bad dreams. So, a nutshell. Take your hands, put them together like this. Not a nut, obviously, but there's a hollow space in the middle. Hamlet says, I could be a king in that space. Infinite space. But, what? He has bad dreams. What's his point? The dreams aren't coming from within the space. The dreams are coming from outside the space. But he says the space would be what to him? Infinite. If it's infinite, it is not finite, not ending. So where do dreams come from? It's like the universe, right? The universe is expanding constantly, all directions, because of the Big Bang. Where is it expanding into? I mean, what's outside the universe? The very term universe kind of implies it's all there is. And yet if it's expanding, it's not all there is, folks. There's something external to it. Hamlet's point is, I could be totally at peace, but I have bad dreams. Where do the dreams come from? Cue Theseus's speech. Lovers, madmen, and poets. They're all the same, right? Because they do what? They body forth the forms of things unknown, and they apprehend things that cool reason can't comprehend. Okay? So, Guildenstern, which dreams indeed are ambition? We're not going to get nearly as far because I'm going to have to spend too much time talking about that and those two things in just a moment. Which dreams indeed are ambition, for the very substance of the ambitious is merely the shadow of a dream. Right? Let's talk about the last part first. The shadow of a dream. What makes shadows? Well, light shining on something. What's the something that it shines on? Have to be opaque. It's got to block light. It's got to be solid in some form. Like even how a cloud can be a solid. It's a big collection of vapor, but it blocks the light, right? So the shadow is the thing created by the light shining on something, and it blocks it and creates this form. He says, the ambitious, the substance of the ambitious is the shadow of a dream. How can a dream create a shadow? A dream is something insubstantial. And he uses the word, we have 2 minutes, substance. What's the substance of this? Right? It's not a trick question. What's the substance of this? Louder? Cotton. Thank you for giving that answer. Why? Because that's what it is made of. What does it appear as? I mean, it doesn't look like I'm wearing a bunch of little white balls, right? It appears as what? A shirt. Shirt is the accident. It's the form it takes. Substance is the essence of it. The essence of this, wood fiber, tree. The accident's paper, okay? We'll stop there. I don't know why I can't ever catch you guys up where we need to be. We'll finish talking, obviously, about Act 2. There's only a couple more pages. And we'll get into Act 3 on Wednesday. Don't forget, there's a quiz due Wednesday night over Acts 1 and 2. Like I said, we'll finish Act 2, so if you want to wait till we finish talking about it, not a problem. All right.